Hi everybody and welcome to Assistive Engine Optimization that arrived in January 2026. I'm here with Laurence O'Toole from Authoritas, Beatrice Gamba from Wordlift and myself, Jason Barnard from Kalicube. Welcome, Laurence.
Thanks very much, Jason. I'm really pleased to be here and talking again about the future of this industry we love so much and where it's going. I should probably have my head in my hands like the image for some reason, because you've invented some more acronyms for us all to think about. But happy to share some of the research we've been doing and definitely seen the content of your slides. Looking forward to getting into that too.
Brilliant. Yeah, and I've seen you've got some delightful things to show us. And Beatrice, welcome to you again. We've been on shows before together. Wonderfully intelligent, and you've got slides to share. And please introduce yourself.
So I'm Beatrice Gamba. I am from Wordlift, from Rome, headquartered in Rome, and I've been working in the AI SEO industry for 10 years now. And I've definitely been talking with Jason for almost like all of my work life. Like he was one of the first people I've been introduced to from Andrea. You and Theodora are the people I've been talking with the most during my career.
Right, which is great. And I've been talking to you for maybe the last 8 or 9 years, and to Laurence for the same amount of time. So we've actually all known each other for that time. And what I love is that we all have the same attitude, the same approach, or a very similar approach, and we're all trying to solve this problem. We're not creating problems, we're looking at it and saying, well, it is very complicated, but there are relatively simple solutions, and that's what we're going to go through today. So for everybody watching, a little bit of housekeeping, please do say what you want in the chat. We've got Sylvia in the background who's looking after that, and she will engage with you and put your questions up on the screen. If there's a question that fits into what we're saying, we'll bring it on immediately and answer it. Otherwise, we've got time at the end for Q&A. So we're going to get right into it now. What I love about this is I was talking about assistive agent optimization last year, and it was this kind of futuristic view. And then in January, Beatrice is going to talk about this, I think. We had, I think it was $50 million of business done with agents already, thanks to Stripe and Cloudflare and a few others. So assistive agents are here already. They're not dominant. It's not super important right now, but it's definitely something we need to build towards. And this is my perspective. I've built out the Kalicube framework. It started off as just the Kalicube process, which was really just about the funnel and SEO, and then AEO, and then AIEO, AI assistive engine optimization. What I realized is that from SEO, search engine optimization, to AEO, answer engine optimization, to AIEO, AI assistive engine optimization, and now assistive agent optimization, each one includes the predecessor. So if you're optimizing for AAO, you're necessarily optimizing for AIEO, AEO, and SEO. So my approach is to say I might as well build my entire strategy for agents, because I will then also optimize for search and answers and assistive engines. And that's the point, is that we're in a three-phase shift. The search era went on for so long. I started in 1998, and in 2023, we were still using search. Then ChatGPT came along, and all of a sudden, we're in a recommendation era, where we have the perfect click. So in search, you had 10 options, and it was an imperfect click. Then in recommendation era, you've got the perfect click, where people come down the funnel in ChatGPT and Perplexity, in Google AI mode, and get the recommendation of what is the perfect click. And then the agential area, which is the one that's coming now, the agent can make a click. But don't think that one replaces the other. They will all cohabit. Some people will always use search. Sometimes search is the way to move forwards. Some people will always want the last word and won't trust an agent. And some people will trust the agent and allow it to make the purchase for them, at which point we end up with what we see on the right here, the funnel entirely within the machine. And it's a bit of a complex diagram. I'm going to share the slide deck with everybody after the show. So you don't need to understand it all. The idea is simply that in search, people would come down the funnel, lots of hopping on and off, In assistive, there's a couple of on and off hopping, and in the agential era, it's straight down the funnel with the agent. The human being is potentially not even in the loop. So what we're going to do today is cover the whole thing with just 3 companies, 3 experts. I cover brand clarity. Wordlift, Beatrice covers the technical infrastructure, and Laurence O'Toole covers measurement. I know, Laurence, you cover more than that, but I've kind of shoehorned you into measurement because that's what I love you for. Tell me about the measurement on Authoritas.
Well, shameless plug. I mean, we're obviously measuring performance across SEO. We've been doing that for since 2006 now, and in the last couple of years, obviously, we started measuring generative results in search generative experience, Google AI overviews, and now large language models like ChatGPT and Gemini and Copilot and so on and so forth. Shortly, we'll be measuring what's happening with agents, and so this is always changing. And for us, I think our old ways of changing and rank tracking, the metrics that we're used to as SEOs are going to evolve as the market evolves, and it's evolving faster than we think. And so our mindset has got to change. And so what I propose is more of a market research framework, and I'd love to talk about that.
Oh, I love that. That's a really good way of saying it. And then Beatrice, you say also that the mindset has to change, and it's knowledge infrastructure, isn't it?
Yeah, it was about, to link to what Laurence has just said about mindset and about how we've been doing SEO for the past decade, how it has to change. So on one hand, we've always been instructed to add structured data, but how much structured data is enough for agents to understand the concepts and what exactly your pages are about without any human assistance? And this is what I'll cover in my slides.
Brilliant, super. So let's get this underway. I'm going to start. Brand clarity. For me, everything starts with brand, and it has been for the last 10 years at Kalicube, and even before that, the 3 or 4 years when I was a freelancer. We have a database of 73 million brands, 25 billion data points, and we're tracking 9 AI platforms. I know Laurence tracks even more than that and more extensively, but we're tracking bottom of the funnel branded search. We're looking at the brand. How does the AI understand your brand, and how does it represent it? And in what circumstances will it recommend you above the competition? So the first point I want to make is entity home optimization. I started talking about the entity home years ago, and it's the single URL that defines you for the AI and for Google. And this used to be true just for knowledge panels. Now it's true for all of the assistive engines, for ChatGPT, for Perplexity, for Claude, and for Google. It needs to know where the entity lives online, where the brand lives online, and it's your opportunity to give your version of your story in your words, saying who you are, what you do, who you serve, and why you're the most credible solution in market. And there is where you can get these engines to understand what you want your brand narrative to be, what the facts are about you, and you can frame those facts to your advantage. Then you need to link out to the proof around the web. And one thing that I've noticed is people will often say, well, I'm saying it and that should be enough. My entity home is very clear about who I am, what I do, who I serve, and that I'm credible, and fail to realize that proof, third-party proof, is essential for these machines to believe you and to repeat with confidence. And we'll come back to confidence later on. I was talking to you, Laurence, the other day, and you were saying context is king. And before that, it was content is king. I would argue confidence is king. So the first thing, the second thing after the entity home at Kalicube that we do is to to do an audit of the knowledge graph. We need to check whether or not you're in the knowledge graph. Does your knowledge panel appear when somebody searches your name? If there's no knowledge panel, then there's no entity anchor. Wikidata, super important. Don't spam it, but it is the open backbone used by ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, Google, and they need it. It's a really helpful resource for them. The point about not spamming it is there are rules about how famous you are, how notable you are. less than Wikipedia, but still you have to respect them. You have to have a certain level of notability in order for the admins not to delete your entity. And one word of warning, creating something in Wikidata, an entry in Wikidata, and having it deleted is worse than having none at all. Wikipedia, even more so. If you're not notable, don't create a Wikipedia page. The Wikipedia page is going to be very powerful, but also it's outside your control. And second of all, if you don't merit it, they will delete that page. And what essentially the machines are hearing is, this is something that I was told was true, and it turns out it's not necessarily true, or it's not trusted, and they lose all of their confidence. So spamming Wikipedia, Wikidata, really bad idea. Schema markup on your website, that's Bea's favorite place in the world, is schema markup. From our perspective, you need it on your entity home. It needs to be clear, organizational person schema with an @ID, and all of the same as links, which is what I'm saying is link out to the proof, link out to the corroboration. And then at the bottom, you can see brand and company profiles, some good examples of places you can place information, you can improve the information, increase the corroborative power of what is around your digital footprint. And these are just some examples. Go out and find out where you're already present, optimize that, make sure that it corroborates, make sure that it frames the claims in the same way that you are on the entity home, then expand out to other sources within your industry that are authoritative and relevant. And then for a person profile on the right-hand side, ORCID, for example, is for academics and researchers. If you're not an academic or a researcher, you'd probably do better to do something within your industry. So try to stick to geographical, if relevant, and industry relevant resources, because that's going to send a very strong message to the engines. And then test. And you need to test across the platforms. Here I've just put ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, Claude, but also Copilot, Siri, Alexa, DeepSeek, and any niche AI tools. And I think that's a point Laurence is going to make later on, is there are a lot of niche tools now in AI. It's spread out from just Google to being an awful lot of different engines that we need to track. And on the left-hand side, you can see some brand terms that we recommend that you track and audit to understand whether or not the machines understand who you are. Do they trust you? Are they likely to recommend you? And are you indeed better than your direct competitor, which is the last one? I would argue that's a bottom of the funnel query, because it's a direct comparison between you and your competitor, and you always want to win those. I put them at the bottom. At the top, we've got the $sign. The BOFU queries around your brand are where you're going to make the most money. It's the easiest win, because those AI engines are recommending you. And if you've convinced all the people you've talked to over the last 6 months that you are amazingly wonderful, and the AI engines confirm it, when somebody is double checking, which they always will, you're going to win that sale. And look in the answers. Number one, look across all of the different engines. But number two, look at when they're hedging, when they say may, reportedly, according to. It lacks confidence. That word confidence comes back again. Is known for, is recognized as very strong corroborated signals if they're omitting information or if they're contradicting themselves. So look at these different results and analyze them as to see whether they're hedging, whether they're confident, whether they're omitting things, and whether they're contradicting each other. And they should all give more or less the same answer. And then corroboration mapping. This is claim frame prove. It's part of the Kalicube process.
Jason, your slides aren't updating.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So I've just spoken for...
Yeah.
That was what I was talking about, and I'll let everybody read that. Thank you very much, Laurence. For the branded terms and across the different platforms, I'll share the slide deck afterwards, so you'll be able to read all of that. So the corroboration mapping, claim frame prove. What you claim is what the brand publishes, and it's assertion about yourself on your own channels. And with that, you need to frame it. Frame it to your advantage and get third parties to prove it. And you need at least 3 independent sources to prove a claim. And that's a good rule of thumb. I make a claim, I frame it to my advantage, and then I prove it. Then next, we're moving on to the UCD framework. I've started saying UCD because I use it all the time. Understandability, credibility, deliverability. Anybody who's here who's listened to me speak in the last 10 years has heard that. Understandability, credibility, deliverability. Understandability, bottom of the funnel, trusted partner, your branded terms. What you want from this AI as a trusted partner is for it to say, yes, in my case, Kalicube is the best company for brand management in AI. We want it to walk the person through the gate to become your client with as little friction as possible and as much confidence as possible. Credibility, middle of the funnel, that's where it's recommending you. It's recommending you over and above your competition. Top of the funnel, it's when it's advocating, when it starts shouting your name around your topic when somebody isn't asking about brands. Somebody is simply researching your specific topic. You want the machine to advocate for you up there at the top of the funnel. And for me, that's the 5. Here is a very detailed overview of how we score and measure and how we fix and why we want to fix UCD scoring. And I've now put understandability at the top. The bottom of the funnel is actually at the top for us, because although your users will come down the funnel through awareness and then consideration and then decision, you need to build the opposite direction, from understanding to convincing the machines of your credibility, to empowering them to deliver your content to the subset of their users who are your audience at the exact moment that audience needs it. And then the last is confidence is king. Content is king. Content is incredibly important. You need that content. You need that content to be in the right context. But most of all, I would argue, once you've got that content and the context is correct, you need the machines to be confident in that information, because if they're confident, they're significantly more likely to recommend you and to advocate for you. So that's Kalicube building up your brand, getting you to a position where the machines trust your brand. And now I'm going to pass it over to Beatrice for the second part.
Thank you, Jason. Actually, I am covering and using some of the words that you are used to. It's a natural consequence. So, yeah, let's start with the actual problem. So, and I like to talk sometimes with hard words, like failure. Like, the reality is that most organizations are not optimizing for AI agents at this state right now. But the problem is that AI systems cannot read the content, because Google's crawlers have been reading pages for years. So failure here is something more specific, and it's about interpretability. It's how AI systems are interpreting your content. It's by inference or by definition. Are we handing out the correct information to AI systems, or are they just guessing what our pages contain? So what does that mean? So when a language model processes an unstructured page about your brand or your product, it builds a statistical model. So it fills in entity references that can be ambiguous when the metadata of the page is not in place or not complete. So if a product name happens to be a common noun or shares a name with a competitor, then the model guesses and probably will get it wrong. So again, if there is no corroboration mechanism, the claim floats without a concrete citation. So this is what happens when model encounters structured entity data. So it can read canonical IRIs, it can disambiguate the relationship and connect it to external knowledge graph match, like Jason said before, connecting your Wikidata instances and so on. So on one hand, we've got what happens when an LLM reads a page without structured data, and what happens when your site contains proper structured data. So the three modes that I identified are doubt, displacement, and absence. So these are not hypotheses. This is what is happening, and it is what most organizations are facing, and it's a cost. So let's go on the next slide. So we published a paper, a research paper, about why JSON-LD fails in RAG systems. So this is something that's been out in the past month or so. And also a lot of clients came to us saying, but why should we add structured data if AI systems are not reading it? Which it's true, because modern AI retrieval engines ingest pages as a single continuous text stream, and then they convert everything to embeddings. So the JSON at this point kind of competes with the content of the page for the limited context window that they get. Yeah, it's right.
Sorry,
slide.
my mistake.
So the JSON-LD gets truncated or even ignored. So schema markup satisfies the validator, yes, but then the AI might never see it. And why am I saying this? Everything makes sense. So we have to make sure to both have the JSON-LD in place, so complete structured data, and still also provide all of the context inside our pages in the form of entity hubs, which is something similar to what Jason said before as defined entity homes. So entity hubs are the interface of the knowledge graph, and they are visible within the page. So they are properties in natural language, explicit internal links between related entities, the referenceable URIs, contextual cues for AI navigation. So the structure is inside the content and not solely hidden inside the code. So we ran this experiment across 4 different industries. We took pages with standard schema.org and JSON-LD, and we tested how accurately AI systems could answer questions about the entities on those pages. So the result was that only marginal improvement happened over unstructured pages. Because what happens is that we have 2 different systems, right? So we have RAG systems, and then we have pre-trained systems. So this is how, like, basically AI systems are divided. But structured data is useful in both systems, because one reads it directly and the other will eventually add your structured data to their training data. So always add structured data, no matter what system reads it. Right. So how do we do that? How do we make sure that we can add all the context that we need inside a page? So how do we build the memory layer? So as I said, the entity hub is the human readable map of your knowledge graph. So it takes the relationships and attributes that technical teams usually encode in JSON-LD and makes them visible, both for humans and for AI agents. So we have 4 main points. So surface properties in natural language means translating the invisible attributes contained in the JSON-LD into descriptive text on the page. So if a product has a schema property, then the property should also be readable content and not only code. Then expose the connection explicitly. Of course, this screens internal links. So do internal linking strategies between the related entities. These are not mere suggestions, but these are, at this point, these are graph navigations. So related products, associated experts, relevant topics, everything that you will put into your schema, make it visible and actionable on the page. Then providing referenceable URIs means adding navigational affordances that can help AI agents understand exactly where they are, how to move through the data, So each entity page becomes a node that an agent can enter and traverse, exit with structured information. So as you can see, like everything that we've been doing as SEO takes place right now. So we've got content strategy, we've got technical SEO, internal linking strategy. So basically, nothing has changed. We just have to do it well. And then finally, the contextual instructions. So these are subtle cues within the page content that can guide these AI systems on how to interpret and actually use the information, and not just like briefly explaining what an entity is or what claims it supports. So this is how we are building the memory layers. So both on the visible surface of the page and structured data. So this is literally nothing new. But because schema.org and the JSON-LD are the baseline, most implementations are still incomplete, because one thing is to satisfy the Google rich result parser, but we have to still give AI systems the entity graph that they need. So the difference basically is in what we link and not just in what we label. So here you can see like what is the most common use of a JSON-LD. So some companies are still adding basic structured data as on the left side of the screen. But in order to make the JSON-LD agent ready, it has to contain as many data points as possible in order for the agents to not interpret, to not guess what the content and of your page is and what your offer, your product offer contain. So yeah, obviously I am also sharing these slides so you will see it better. Sorry, the quality of the image is not perfect, but you can still see what the main differences are. So taking it one step further, we have to connect, of course, the graph to the content assets that we just said. So a knowledge graph, if isolated, is basically just a catalog, but we have to connect the content in order for it to become like a queryable index of everything your organization knows and claims. So the technical implementation basically requires these 3 layers to work together. So we've got entity definitions, the layer 1, yes, of course, is the entity definition. So each entity has a canonical IRI, schema type, at least one CMS link to an external knowledge graph, which is very important to corroborate what we are saying. And this is the node layer. This is basically the foundation. Layer 2 is content entity mapping, and this is where the memory layer research is most relevant. So the entity hub lives at the layer 2. It's not just about adding schema about in the code. It is the knowledge graph that's made visible on the page, and this is what I was talking about before. So this is where RAG retrieval can actually find answers to users' users' questions, and this is the layer that most organizations are still working on. And then we've got the relationship graph. So how do we put into relation every entity and every page? For example, a product is part of a category, a person can be the member of an organization. So this is what makes the graph actually traversable rather than just searchable. So agents can come and go from one entity to the other rather than just be looped into one single page. And it's very important to have these 3 levels verified and happening at the same time. So this is what it means to change the mindset. So we need to also change what we asking ourselves. So agents are now crawling. Web crawling is a proxy actually for data access, but agents are not only crawling, they are calling tools on your pages and on your website. So the protocol that's becoming a standard for agent to data communication, I'm talking about the MCP, the Model Context Protocol, that's been published by Anthropic, that Jason mentioned before, adopted by OpenAI, Google, and other major enterprise vendors. So again, what does this mean for organization? Because sometimes there are these buzzwords, but we don't know what to make of them. So when we ask, can a bot crawl my page? Is this page indexed? Am I mentioning all of my keywords? So this question has to be reverted and optimized for today. So can an AI agent query this page and get accurate information? Are all of my entities on this page resolvable? Are they leading to any external source that an AI agent can verify? Is the data current? Because this is also a theme. Is the API tool accessible? So the code here, the example shown is a simplified MCP tool definition. So the site exposes a get product info endpoint, and an agent calls it with a query, and it gets back structured, then typed entity data. So there's no HTML parsing, no statistical inference, because we are providing accurate data and directly return to the agents. So this is how we are doing AI agent optimization today. And of course, a lot is in the making. I mean, this is not set in stone, and this is why I like what I do so much. I'll go quick. So before schema.org, before the entity apps or any tooling, an organization, of course, must agree on a set of canonical definition. So knowledge graph or company data organization is not just a tagging exercise. It sounds obvious, but almost every organization gets this wrong in practice. So the definition of an entity universe is pivotal before implementing anything else. So the brand is an organization entity that owns different products and services and be connected with specific markup types, like makes offer, has product, and those products themselves are associated with other people and topics, with other schema attributes. And this is a basic exercise that is very important for every organization, because it's basically a blueprint of their most basic offering system. And it's very useful when actually having to implement the structured data and the knowledge graph. And then we have to make sure that every entity is also corroborated, like how many mentions in external databases does my company have, or does my product have? Can I add the reference to the GTIN or to the Google Merchant Center ID? So everything has to be tracked and actually added to the knowledge graph and metadata layer. So yeah, again, this is the shift that most content and SEO teams have to actually be monitored and watch, because it's already here. I mean, this is not, sometimes we say this is the future, but this is already happening. So if we look at the flow on this slide, an agent needs information about the brand. So today, without MCP, the agent crawls the HTML, it chunks it, converts it to embedding, etc., etc. But with an MCP, it calls a tool, gets the entity data on your server, and receives the type the canonical JSON LD entity data back. So how do I get my website in place? So we have to check that your IRIs are actually resolving to a valid JSON LD. So this is very important, like the ID thing is very important to have set on your knowledge graph, because it's the single most important action that you can run today and requires no tooling. Then we have to make sure that we are exposing a structured JSON LD endpoint per entity. Then we have to define the tool function that the MCP server will expose all of the entity information. And then, of course, we have to register with the MCP discovery directory. So until now, publishing meant making content available to humans with a URL. But in the agent era, publishing means making data available to machines with a tool. And these 4 steps are where it starts, and I am available to discuss this further if anyone's interested or has any question. And then, of course, on top of it, all this structure requires governance, and this is also what Jason was mentioning towards the end of his leg. Operationally, this is the hardest point, because a knowledge graph, if it's implemented just once and never updated, is not an asset. It's just a liability, because products get retired, people change roles, services might be repositioned. So we always have to make sure that the information that we are giving out on our knowledge graph are constantly updated. And the decay problem is actually a thing. So the user or an agent might find information that are no longer what they are in reality. So the governance requires named owners for entity definition. So someone must be held accountable, event triggers, so that when a product is updated, you automatically update your schema. And then there's also corroboration audit, so to check that all the CMS links are still alive and still correct. So, for example, here we are showing what validation endpoints would look like in practice. So the maintenance of the graph is still something that holds even more importance today. And finally, I wanted to close with a set of 5 points that basically recap what we been saying until now. And this is an actual order of how we should actually do them, because sequence matters just as much as the whole list. So adding ID and CMS to every entity, I believe, is the single most important thing that you can do today to optimize your data layer. Redesigning your key pages as entity hubs or entity homes. Mapping every content asset to its entities using relationship type schemas, so about, mentions. This makes it easier for agents to scan and traverse your content. Auditing your site for MCP readiness, and then implementing governance triggers. So when content is published in your CMS, make sure to run a validation pipeline automatically, still check that all your IRIs are resolvable, CMS links are alive, and so on. So schema is the foundation, but again, the memory layer, it's what makes everything retrievable, both by humans, by agents, and also by, of course, search engines. And that's all from my end.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I was desperately trying to type in some helpful information. That was great. I'm super keen on Wordlift's approach of building a knowledge graph. And as you said, Beatrice, when I speak to brands, the first thing we do is sit down and say, what is your brand? What are the other entities around it? And how do they all relate to each other? And it's an existential question that almost always stumps people, and they get stuck and they can't explain it. And that's the first sign that you're not ready. And once you are ready and you figured that out, put it into a knowledge graph to communicate with the AI. Now, thank you very much. On to you, Laurence, your turn.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Jason. Thanks, Beatrice. Hopefully that set the scene nicely for some of the content I want to share today. I want to talk to you about the three actors: humans, bots, and agents. Obviously, we spent the last few years optimizing for the old web, for humans, browsing and finding things. And I picture myself, I don't know, let's say 2036, 10 years time, grandchild on my knee. Well, actually, let's make it 2040. That's too soon. But maybe say another 15 years time, grandchild on me, and I'm going to them. God, do you remember? We used to have these things called websites. There were millions of them, and these search engines. And can you believe we used to have to search for stuff ourselves, research it, evaluate it, decide what to buy, and then purchase it ourselves. We had none of these newfangled robots and multiple agents, proactive agents that you kids have got. You don't know you were born. And, you know, those type of stories have been told since time immemorial. You know, change is happening, and it's happening faster than we think, faster at a pace. You know, I've been doing this 20, 25 years, and it's happening faster and faster. So we are moving to a world where we need to think about optimizing for machines. We, you know, and without recapping what you've covered, obviously, you know, the nature of the buyer journey is going to be different. Your diagram, you know, of the agent going straight down the funnel and shortening the discovery process is true. I looked at what I bought on Amazon in the first quarter of this year. I reckon 70% of that I'll let an agent happily buy for me: lawn seed and car wash and nails and screws and bits and pieces that I didn't care too much about. But there are some things that we probably won't let agents buy for us. They're not quite good at deciphering matters of style or taste. And you know, you might asked it to buy a Union Jack teddy bear the other day, and it came up with some horrendous ones before it finally settled on a nice one from Harrods. So,
the one you sent me.
Yeah. So it's on its way. So, so my point is that it is changing, and you know, it's changing very fast. And yes, you know, the days are here where agents, your next customer could be an agent, and those transactions may happen on other AI surfaces, not necessarily on your own website. And so one of the things I wanted to touch on first in terms of the future, which I think has a bearing today on how we think about measurement, is generative UIs. We've spent the last couple of years since ChatGPT launched talking about generative content and generative AI, but generative UIs are already here. You know, before we had the static SERP and you know, rankings were deterministic, and getting to the top position was the be all and end all. And that was, you know, reasonably static. Sure, the big Google updates and everyone would panic. But basically that position has changed, and Google has started disrupting itself and is moving with AI mode towards more of a chat type of interface, because clients, users like us, prefer better answers. And brand mentions and citations are key in that new world, because large language models are probabilistic, and the results change much more. They're much more volatile than they were with a traditional SERP. But they've also, with Gemini 3, started to introduce this interactive element where the interface can be built on the fly. And you'll see that in the example in November where Google mentioned this. They've got a generative UI patent. There's new emerging protocols like agency, ATUI, agency UI, and also even WebMCP, MCP to UI. So, you know, all of this is changing, and UIs are going to be able, or agents can be able to generate user interfaces on the fly in response to the user's intent and the context. And so the perfect answer won't just be the perfect response to your question, it will be the perfect response delivered in the perfect format and at the perfect time for that user's needs, because obviously some things will be delivered proactively in the future as well. So that means the dynamic is changing, and you cannot rely on the usual measures that we've had before. So for example, keyword rankings, sure, Google's still you know, the monopoly in most markets and is the one that we care about, but as it moves more into a chat interface, those interfaces, the user responses that come back are going to be more dynamics, and measuring them, we're going to need a different set of tools to measure them. So things like search volumes, which again were never perfect, but they were bucketed, all close variants grouped together, rounded into these big buckets, are still useful directionally. But in a world of AI search, we are adding as consumers much more context than we've added before. So instead of searching for cute cuddly teddy bear, I might search for a teddy bear that's made with sustainable materials, got a Union Jack on it, and is available for delivery in the next week under £50. And so we're providing much more information. We're uploading files, we're giving access to tools, context, previous histories. And so when it comes to researching what our customers want, the large language models are an insane tool for us to use. They have all this world knowledge that they've gobbled up, and if you prompt them in the right way, you can build a systematic framework to understand your audience that I'd argue is much better than our old way of focusing on keywords and search volumes. So ask about your audience, think about your lines of business, think about the different customers, the personas that could buy your products and services, and in what context they might buy them. What's their buyer journey like? What are the use cases, the applications, the scenarios, the events, the occasions on which they might buy your products and services or your competitors? Think about locations and languages. And if you can build a framework, then you can apply this framework across all your lines of business and generate prompts that reflect what large language models are telling us users are asking them for. The exact question doesn't matter as much as understanding those concepts, those key commercial factors that consumers find important when buying your products and services. So that for me is the first thing when I talk about a research framework. This is more like market research than it is ever SEO research. You need to go deep into what your audience is looking for and service them. On the bot side, I think Beatrice sort of sums up really well. We need to make sure your content is indexable and crawlable, of course, and machine readable, but machine actionable. And there are protocols emerging now, like WebMCP, for example, where you can mark up your content. So rather than agents coming and visiting your site and scraping it and trying to work out where everything is, you can tell them where the elements are on your page. And hopefully they'll be more successful when they come to try and check out or discover your products on your page. And when I talk about agents, I'm talking about large language models in general here as a third audience. And you need to understand that large language models are volatile. I'll give you some examples of some research we've done in this area now. And you need to feed the machine. So they are content hungry and they are context hungry. So when Beatrice talks about enriching your products, and adding structure to them and properties and schema and showing that on the page, I completely agree. And I think go as far as possible to contextually enrich them. So this goes well with, this looks great with, this could be situated with, also bought with. There's lots of other context you can add to a product to make it more useful for humans and for agents. And these emerging protocols are there. You need to be aware of them. The agentic commerce protocol from OpenAI and Stripe, UCP from Google and 20 other major retailers, and WebMCP. These are protocols you need to make sure that your content feeds and site is geared up to support. So if we look at those consumer journeys, I just want to really just touch on one point: longer prompts. Clients are searching differently. We had some data from Grok, which was leaked last year. We analysed that. 85% of prompts were over 10 words. ChatGPT published their research. I think it was on 1 million conversations. 75% were longer than 10 words. So questions are getting longer. And consumers are asking different types of questions. And I think this is why we're seeing interest from brands that were never interested before in SEO, but are interested in AI search, because their brand is being presented in answers, and it's either being presented in a favorable light and a light that properly reflects that entity, or it's there's a hallucination about it, or worse still, they're being denigrated, and because John in Milwaukee is slagging it off because he's had a bad experience with your brand. And so clients are asking, I want to buy a family car. I can now ask, I'm looking to buy a family electric car, which one should I avoid? There are different types of questions, and I'm getting answers in the world before I was just getting 10 blue links. So all of this makes a lot of difference. And we talked about tools and memory. I think really one of the things that I'm seeing is community signals are massively important for large language models. They help refine the answers. And even if large language models don't present some of that content, they will reference websites they will use to formulate the answers, then not display those links to clients. And we're seeing that when we inspect the hidden network requests behind ChatGPT, for example. And so before, communities were always regarded as sort of a post-sale thing. It was like a cost of doing business. You need to have a community and answer questions. Now that content's been surfaced at the top of the funnel. And it's a good methodology that large language models use to corroborate the claims you're making in your marketing messages. So I would say, I would expect to see more investment in communities by brands moving forward. So I think this all leads us to the fact that stuff is changing very fast. Agentic commerce is on the way. The race has started, and you need to be in it. So if you're optimizing for humans, bear in mind, we're just not talking about Google and Bing anymore. We're talking about OpenAI, Gemini, Copilot, but we're also talking about services like TikTok and Instagram, Facebook, and others. And you need to optimize for them on those AI surfaces, as well as when they visit your website or come back to your website, or whether they're using agents and never visit your website at all because the transaction happens either in their agent or on an agentic AI surface, like, obviously a Google AI mode, OpenAI launch, Perplexity are launching Pay with Pro. So they're all launching these agentic e-commerce surfaces where you can discover products and check out without ever visiting a retailer's website. So audience research is fundamental to this, and contextually enriching PDPs and content is important, making sure your site is fast. The site speed is important for retrieval as well from large language models. When they do a query on the fly, you want to make sure your content's retrieved very quickly. And when they arrive on your site, they probably are going to expect some sort of conversational AI and some level of personalization and intuitive site search. So you need to up your game on your own site as well to give users the kind of experience they're used to getting elsewhere. So for us, the research framework starts by asking AI, and you can see here, there's a screen you may or may not be able to see, but I was looking up cuddly toys, and I'm asking AI, before I generate a set of prompts to market my cuddly toys, what's important to customers? And it's telling me design and aesthetics, brand reputation, material quality, price point, and safety compliance. You don't want your teddy bear to set on fire. So I can do this for different buyer groups and different languages, for different question types. And this gives you a systematic market research oriented framework on which you can generate a representative set of prompts that properly inform your decision making. And from here, you can then look at the content and see whether your content is covered, how you're performing against your competitors, which sources are being cited, are your own sources being cited, and you can build an optimization framework. I'm not going to touch on bots. This screen's just here to just illustrate that we used to care about Google, and now there's all these other bots. And typically, the major platforms have 3 bots: one for training, one for search, one for user interaction. And if you get a lot of bot visits, it doesn't necessarily translate to user visits. But take the time to learn what type of content is being crawled with your log analysis. And you may see different patterns across different types of bots crawling different types of pages. And to Beatrice's point, you need to ask the questions: can bots crawl this data? Is it accessible? Is it machine readable? Just one little bot stat here. I mean, everyone's probably aware of Cloudflare Radar, and you can see it's saying at the moment that sort of 30% of traffic is bot and 70% human. I'm not sure what percentage is agent. It's small, but going to grow exponentially, I would say. But Human Security, a security company, published some research earlier this year that said when they just looked at agentic browsers, 87% of all pages browsed by agents were related to products, which I think tells you a little bit about where that journey is going and how important agents will be to the future of e-commerce. So for me, large language models are hungry. You need to feed them with great content, really good context about the occasions, the use cases, the applications. Don't think just about your product. Think about the why behind your product. Why might people buy this? And surface that on your content, in your PDP, in your schema, and in your product feeds that are surfaced to AI engines to meet Google shopping specs or agentic AI specs from OpenAI, etc. There's so much more to say, and most of the time, I think product descriptions or product feeds were created as a bit of a chore. It was almost like, I've got to get this out and get this done. Or actually, you can add tremendous depth to it. And if you've done your audience research, you'll understand what key factors are important to customers when they're considering buying, and you can add that into your product feed, and that will make a difference. So I'm going to touch on a little bit of research really quickly. our ranking metrics need to change. I think search volume is going to be directional, it's useful. I think prompt volumes in AI platforms are a load of baloney, and people make this stuff up because AI platforms are not releasing any first party data about search volumes. So you've got to build new measurement techniques, and for me, you've got to understand consistency of presence, not just share of brand mentions, not just share of citations, but how consistently you appear. Because what we're finding in our research is LLMs are volatile. There's a school of thought online, you can't measure this stuff, they're changing all the time. Yes, the textual response has changing all the time. Rand Fishkin just recently posted some research he'd done with a Gumshoe, another AI tool. And they were showing that, basically you could run the same query 1,000 times and the two responses wouldn't be the same because the text is very volatile. And that is true. But what we're seeing is there is a more stable core than you think, and the volatility is around the fringes. And so our research showed that for non-branded queries, LLMs only return a single brand 3% of the time. Even for branded queries, it's only 25% of the time. If you ask a specific question about a brand, large language models recognize people like to window shop, and they will mention other brands. 66% of our answers contained multiple brands. We did a survey of 3,000 prompts across 10 categories and different types of questions. And there were nearly 500,000 observations in terms of brands and citations here across all these major models here. And what we're seeing is a pattern. The exact amounts may differ, but we are seeing, sometimes there's no brand, rarely there's one brand, but more often than not, 2/3 of the time there's multiple brands. But those brands change. And this is a good example of for non-branded and branded, and why you need a market research type of framework. If you measure consistency over a 7-day period, you will see for your prompts that the same brands do appear and then other brands come in and out. So this axis, or the label, sorry, the legend's very, very small on this chart, but you've got the default choice, leadership, challenger, established, intermittent, and sporadic, and then absent. And so 45% for unbranded queries, 45% of those brands in that 7-day period just came in once and disappeared again. They were sporadic. But there is a core chunk of tools that are that appear more often. Obviously, if you ask branded prompts, that goes slightly higher. And to remember it, I thought I'd come up with an analogy which hopefully can relate to everybody. This is obviously probably Liverpool Football Club, probably one of the greatest football clubs in the world. And if I'm a season ticket holder, I wish, and I turned up every week, there are certain players I'd always expect to see. They're my default choice. Alisson, the goalkeeper, Virgil, the captain, Kanata, the other centre-back, Zoboslai is playing amazingly, McAllister, Ekitike. They are the default choice. They're the ever-presence. I would be surprised if they weren't playing. And then you've got senior players, Salah, Kirkes-Wirtz, Bradley, Gravenberch, who are there pretty much most of the time, and you'd expect to see them too. And then you have different tiers, different layers of brands that appear every so often. You've got the players that don't appear on the fringes of the squad very often at all. And then you've got people who are absent because they're injured, or Jota, God rest his soul, is no longer with us. And then you've got players like Ngoma, who's new and is going through those tiers really rapidly. He was sporadic, he's now intermittent, he's now challenging. He started the other game, he's starting. And this is what you're expecting. It's the same with brands. You're seeing these patterns in brands. And if you look at brands over a period of time, you'll see that certain brands are the default choice. They may not appear 100% of the time. They might appear 99% of the time or 90% of the time. And then you'll see challenger brands, leaders that appear, 6 or 7 times out of 7 in that window, and then the intermittent brands. And it's really important for prompt tracking, because if you just tracked on the 14th of December or the 13th of December, you'd get a completely irrelevant picture of your marketplace for that response. And it's true for citations as well. The citations fluctuate, probably even more so. So again, depending on when you take your analysis, you can see if I did it on the 15th of December, I'm missing a big chunk of websites that didn't appear that day. And so what you need to do is treat it more like a market research exercise, and you need to check windows and analyze consistency of brand mentions, consistency of share of citations, not just share of citations, and share of brand mentions. And this gives you a framework for which you can operate. You can analyze all your prompts across all the key factors, the lines of business, the categories and subcategories that are important to your customers, and you can categorize, are we a default choice? Are we ever present? Great. We just need to defend and maintain that. Are we in a leadership position, a challenger position, so on and so forth? And you can go up that tree. And so, yeah, so for me, that's a really important framework. And then when you come to optimize for agents, obviously today, SEO, the discovery channel is human, checkout's human, answer engine optimization, discovery is done by the agent, checkout's the human, but it's going to agent, at least in some categories. And you need to feed those agents. So bear in mind, your next customers could be an agent. And I look at it at 4 layers: discoverability, operability, transactability, if that's such a word, and coordination. So layer 1 is, does the AI know about your brand and products? And that's everything that you've shared so far, Jason and Beatrice. It's making sure you've got the entity home, schemas organized, you're saying the right things, your signals are consistent, and then you can contextually enrich your products. Can an agent interact with your website? So, can it consume your feeds? Can you add web MCP, for example, so an agent can actually crawl your website effectively? Do that now and gain a first mover advantage. If you're in the e-commerce side, can an agent buy your product in chat or on your website using ACP and UCP protocols? If you don't join the crowd and don't implement those protocols, then the agent will just bypass you. And there's so many brands there, they'll recommend somebody else. And the last one, which we really haven't got time to touch on today, is agent to agent. What happens in a multi-agent world when multiple agents collaborate? That's going to be something I'll be telling my grandchildren about in 10 or 15 years time. So
from what you said, your grandchildren are going to be telling you about it.
Yeah, probably. So really quickly, just last point: old way, new way. Track Google. Now we've got to track multiple services. It was all about rankings and ranking #1. Even I put the old way, AI visibility metrics. Old way. I mean, people have only been doing this for less than a year, but I would bet most people are tracking answer engine visibility in the wrong way, in a misleading way, because they've come at it from an old rank tracking perspective. Think about it in research waves. You gain more from asking more questions in a research wave and taking action on them, and then doing it again next quarter or next month, than checking them every week or every other day or whatever it might be. Think more about prompt families, really research in depth your audience. Think about your community, because that corroborates your claims you're making in your marketing. And make sure that your brand experience is brilliant when they come to your website. And the last one is build a strategy. And for me, that strategy could work as really simply by the LLM ladder principle. And it's all about, can I be shortlisted consistently? And that's all I've got.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Brilliant. Absolutely wonderful. We got several questions. I don't know if we're going to have time to answer them. I think we can have a quick couple of questions. Laurence, you said you had to leave, so you are excused, as we say at school. And Bea and I will answer any questions that we can for the people remaining. But you were talking about getting ready for the future. And my perspective here is really that you have to start today, because it takes time for you to build the technical infrastructure, as Beatrice was saying, but it also takes time to propagate. And if you think, well, I'll do it at the end of the year, it'll be fine. By that time, you've already missed the boat. You need to be in place this year. You need to create that knowledge graph. You need to implement the technical infrastructure so that the machines have the time to digest it before this really kicks off. And the other point, that this is actually Claude, my assistant, who made that point, is this is the time to get a benchmark. Get yourself a baseline set up now, because that's what's going to be allowing you to measure what happens in the future. And as you say, Laurence, it's going to become more and more opaque. And the more you can't see what's going on in the background, the more you will be grateful and happy that you created that baseline in 2026, when we still have some visibility. So thank you very much. It was Laurence O'Toole from Authoritas, Beatrice Gamba from Wordlift, and myself, Jason Barnard from Kalicube. I would love to answer a couple of these questions, but Laurence, you don't have to say.
Sorry, I've got to go. But I would happily, anyone wants to email me at or on LinkedIn, happily answer any questions anyone's got. And if anyone's interested in following up, I'd love to hear.
Brilliant. Thank you, Laurence.
Thank you so
I'm going to
much.
ask. See you later, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
I would like Beatrice to answer this question. I saw it coming through. I think this is exactly the question you are going to be most qualified to answer.
Yeah, right. I saw it while I was talking, but I could not read it while talking. So, yeah, I'm talking about JSON LD. So it's JSON for linked data. So it's not technically a document database, but it's mostly a serialization of RDF, which is a graph model. And this distinction is the whole point. So a document database like JSON stores self-contained objects, whereas a graph stores relationships between objects, between entities. So when an agent asks not just what is this product, but what products share the same ingredient from the same brand recommended by this expert, then that query requires a graph. And mere document logic wouldn't traverse it. So yes, graph database thinking is the right mental model for building markup at scale, but it requires the JSON LD, which is the interchange format that makes the graph readable.
Yeah.
So it's two different.
Can we just say it's kind of a translation?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Brilliant. So there you go. Brilliant. Absolutely delightful. One last question, and I like this one. How relevant are grounding queries in Bing Webmaster's tools? I actually talked to somebody from Microsoft about this before they launched it. Now they've launched it. And the grounding is a really interesting question because it comes from the fact that I call them AI assistive engines. So Google AI Mode, ChatGPT, Gemini, as Laurence was saying, they're building the interface. They're building dynamic knowledge panels into Gemini now or into ChatGPT. And we can see that they're assistive engines that are building on the fly these incredible UX that wasn't possible before with Google and with Bing. And the grounding is all about the machine desperately trying not to make a fool of itself. The LLM has all this knowledge, and it's from, let's say, a year ago. It's basically probabilistically making the best possible guess it can. It wants to check against the knowledge graph for the fact. When it can, it will. But not everything is in the knowledge graph because Google's knowledge graph is 54 billion entities. And that's tiny when you think about all the things there are to know about the world. When you consider all of history is in there, or a lot of history is in there, 54 billion, let's say 70% of it is actually history, and very little of it is actually what we are today. So the fact checking is incredibly difficult for them. So they then use search results, but search results are unreliable. So what they do is map across the ground. The grounding is taking the recent search results to double check what they're saying now and trying to get a consensus to make sure that they say something sensible and something that serves their user in the goal of getting to the best solution for that user, for that particular problem in their particular context, with as much confidence as possible, as fast as possible. And that's the aim of the machines, get you, the user, to the solution to your problem or the answer to your question as efficiently as possible. So thank you very much, Beatrice. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope everybody out there enjoyed it. And you get the outro song. A quick goodbye to end the show. Thank you, Beatrice and Laurence, who's now left. And
I missed that.
See you later. Thank you, Beatrice.
Bye.